Good. All right, we're live.
We are live. What's going on, everybody? It is Marcos and Seamus again with another episode of the Macro Perspective. Team, we've got an amazing guest. Jess. Jess here is a clinical therapist, but also a performance health and nutrition coach as well. Kind of blends the two worlds, but I'll let her kind of introduce herself. I'm very excited about this conversation. But Jess, would you mind just introducing yourself, what your background is, so everyone can get some context, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm Jess Durando. I'm a licensed clinical therapist, as well as a certified nutrition and certified pre and postnatal coach. And I love blending coaching and counseling together to help clients create sustainable systems to meet their own needs, to take a mind-body approach to setting goals and being able to improve their relationship with food, their relationship with themselves, and show up in their life the way that they really want. So it's a cool opportunity to utilize the clinical skill set I have with clients that helps prioritize mental health, as well as the coaching skill set I have with goal setting and accomplishing things that they want for their life, and really combining that physical component of things and helping clients be more successful.
I love that. I love how you're taking the clinical world and the practical way of things. And it seems like it's a great niche that you've been working with and the people that you've been working with. What got you into that world of getting these certifications, becoming a therapist? What was the big driver for you?
So I've been a therapist since 2009, and I loved the field, had no desire to leave. But I did around 2011 hire my own nutrition coach, just had some goals, was working out a ton, wasn't seeing the results that I wanted. And through working with that nutrition coach, not only did I have a lot of success, but I also started to think, wow, I'm working so much with these clients on clinical issues, but it's so easy for us to underestimate the basics. Like, how are these clients sleeping? What are they eating? How are they moving? Are they hydrated? And the roles that those physical components had on their mental health. So I started noticing I was utilizing those tools more in therapy, but I also started to realize that there were a lot of clients out there that didn't actually need therapy. Maybe there was something clinically going on. I mean, listen, I'm a therapist. I think everybody needs therapy, but maybe they needed or would have been able to also utilize a program that was more targeted to their goals, more focused on goal setting, and more accessible than therapy was for them. So that's really when I moved more into the coaching space and was able to really specialize more in nutrition. But because of my skill set and my clinical background, I found myself taking on a lot of clients that had mindset blocks, body image concerns, struggling with their relationship, some all or nothing thinking or comparison going on. So I really created a solid niche there of being able to help clients. And then over the years and progressing and becoming a parent, I started also specializing in working with parents, which prompted the certification in the pre and postnatal coaching. Because man, once you deal with pregnancy and postpartum and you become a parent, the concept of creating healthy habits is it's a whole different world too.
No, that you touched so much on there, Jess. And I think it's important to note that your background is super amazing. And I think it's important to showcase that with, people's mindsets, whether it be a mental block, a body issue, things like that. I think it's super, super important. I wanted to ask you, what have you seen in your specialty with patients? Like, what are the biggest mindset blocks that they've had? And we can blend the two together, if that's all right with you, just because we're more of a podcast that talks about longevity, fitness, nutrition. So we can kind of bring it down into that realm without going too deep into the clinical stuff, because that could be a little too deep. But what do you feel has been like some of the biggest mindset things you've been coaching clients for the last few years?
So, there was this weird generational thing I felt like for a lot of clients that I work with now who are maybe in their 30s and 40s, let's say, where we grew up with just fad diet after fad diet after fad diet. And there was so much messaging around being smaller and shrinking, and a lot of ties to worth and food choices or body image. So the amount of body image talks and situations that I come up with clients, it's really kind of never ending. And all of these rules around food, I think also really closely ties into this mindset this distorted way of thinking of like all or nothing thinking, right? Food is good or bad. This training is right or wrong. I'm passing or failing. So I would say like universally 99% of my clients have dealt with some sort of all or nothing thinking, some sort of unhealthy relationship with food, which the two are tied together. And so they've tried diet after diet and they haven't been successful. They haven't been consistent. They haven't noticed a positive mindset shift. And part of the reason why is because at no fault of their own, they, or, you know, the templates they found or the websites they Googled weren't able to address the issues that were at the core of the problem, which was the mindset related issues. Most people can follow a plan as long as it works for them, as long as they're in a good headspace to be able to do it, as long as it's considering the systems that are sustainable for their life, which is why templates don't work as effectively as one-on-one coaching that addresses mindset.
I love that. I love that. Marcos, do you want to follow up on any of that?
Yeah, mindset's a weird one. I mean, I remember like first coming into coaching and like results were kind of X's and O's. And I talked about this on here before, but I got to talk with you about, Jess, in, you know, some of our calls recently, that I found that like I've had to develop even more empathy than I ever have as a coach in recent years. And do you feel like, I mean, basically since 2020, since we've been like sequestered to our homes, that there's been more of a need now more than ever to have like, again, like multiple social support systems, whether it is like a therapist, a coach, and then like also like people that you actually go out and see? That'd be my question here.
So I could like get on a whole soapbox about this, but I think that one thing that 2020 really highlighted is that stress in general is a biopsychosocial experience. So when you are feeling stress, there are biological factors contributing, psychological factors contributing, and social factors contributing. So when we are not feeling our best, when we're struggling to maintain healthy habits, when we're not in the best place with our mental and physical health, we have to take a holistic approach to addressing it. And I think that, you know, the pandemic really highlighted that because we no longer had access to social supports maybe the way that we wanted. I know some people, you know, again, especially if they were parents or, you know, if their job was impacted or there was financial concern, maybe they weren't able to exercise the way that they wanted or go to the gym or get the fresh foods at the grocery store the way that they really wanted. And targeting just one of those things does allow progress to happen, but it's not the same as finding, you know, a doable way to target all of the things. So I think that clients in general are now recognizing it's not just about the food. Like the food is one piece of it. But if we're really trying to improve overall wellness, because majority of my clients, their goal is longevity. They have performance, they have aesthetic goals, but at the end of the day, they want to live a long, healthy life and be active and participatory in their life. So the reality is now they're like, okay, it's not just about hitting macros or eating certain foods or following a certain training program. This is really, how do I take a biopsychosocial approach to living a healthy, full life?
Ooh, that leads me to a quick follow-up question, and I'm gonna like actually use this here. Like, what is your message when working with most of your clients if we're relating it to this, like that biopsychosocial area, or do you have a key message that you're usually trying to articulate, or does it change depending on the individual?
Yeah, I mean, I think from an one-on-one coaching perspective, it can change, but I think that at the core of what I do, my goal is to help clients redefine what effective self-care is. A therapist coach take on self-care, a coach's take on self-care, not just, you know, bubble baths and spa days and all the other messaging, but that self-care is understanding how to eat well relative to your needs and your goals, understanding how to move well, understanding how to meet those basic needs, understanding, you know, what social self-care looks like, what functional self-care looks like, what seeking joy looks like, that it is taking a holistic, well-rounded approach to making more deposits in your wellness bank, if you will, than withdrawals. Now, what everybody's process looks like, what their individual wellness deposits look like, that's pretty subjective. And that's the beauty of one-on-one coaching. But my primary message is, let's start redefining self-care, understanding what it really is. Let's create some sustainable systems where you can make it happen. And maybe most importantly of all, let's start creating the narrative that it's not just that you deserve to meet your own physical and mental needs, it's that you are entitled to it, to be able to live the life that you want.
I love that a lot. I notice this a lot within myself, in my relationships, even with my clients. Like sometimes we've put off self-care because we feel or believe that we don't deserve it. I personally have dealt with like body dysmorphia, and nothing clinically set, but I was a wrestler, and everyone on the podcast knows this, but it's like I ruined my body, my metabolism. I was hurt. I was doing all kinds of crazy training, wrestling training, CrossFit, under eating, under nourishing, under recovering, and like getting messed up as a teen all the way into my college years. And I always was like, no, like there's no room for giving myself a break. There's no room for, I don't know, whatever, right? Like I always had to put in work and do all this stuff. What kind of approach would you take with somebody? And this is probably more so with like teens, but we do see this with people that are so obsessed about a goal that they just seem to forget about themselves wholly entirely. Not just like an athlete like myself, like trying to be, having this body dysmorphia, but I see it with just clients that like they spend so much time taking care of their kids. They go to work. They like forget like, hey, you're supposed to like go get a massage once in a while, or like, I don't know, spend an hour with yourself, read a book. Like, what's your message to those types of people if they basically don't believe that they should be getting that?
I think that there's tremendous opportunity there. I mean, I always, and this is probably the therapist in me, but I always want to understand the why. Why are we doing that? Why are we chasing that goal? Why are we going all in on it? And listen, I'm all for like throwing ourselves 100% into something. And I believe that if you want something changed, then you have to change in order to make it happen. But I also think that there's beauty and balance too, and that we don't have to go running headfirst into something, in order to make it happen, because more often than not, we're not balanced and we get to the point of diminished returns, right? Like, I think that it is very easy right now for things to be labeled as a self-care strategy, but there's a fine line between a tool being a benefit versus a tool being a burden. And so, like, if we take dieting, for example, some people are totally appropriate to diet, and that's beneficial and that's healthy for them. And maybe they're, wanting to improve blood markers or get to a healthy weight or whatever. But at some point, as we've all seen, dieting is no longer healthy for an extended period of time. So part of it is understanding why we're wanting to reach this goal, why we're still running at it full force. Can we get clear on making sure that the whys are internal drivers and not external drivers or mindset blocks or old habits? And is there maybe opportunity to have that more holistic approach to self-care? Because self-care does, just like it exists outside of the bubble baths of spa days, it also exists outside of like strict, nutrition, tracking, whatever that looks like, and strict training. We want to really create, again, that biological, psychological, social approach to feeling good.
No, I love that. Marcos, any follow-up there, man?
Like, it got me thinking, like, relative to your question, actually, like Seamus, and not her response, but rather like being the person that is so, like, I guess, like, growth mindset oriented and like in pursuit of this goal because you think your life will become easier. That like, I mean, I guess, like, what's a good like tip to like balance that all out? Because this goal could be a very delayed gratification goal that requires the head down for that like working professional, and or, again, like you mentioned, being more like, mindset with moms, and their role never ends, right? I mean, as we speak, I feel really guilty that my wife is alone with my kids, and I'm over here in Washington, DC, and I literally was talking where I feel like I'm doing self-care right now. I'm actually getting the thing that I know that I need most, but I feel guilty in the process. Like, how do you overcome that? How do you feel that way?
So because I work with a lot of moms, mom guilt is incredibly come up, right? And the reality is, it's so funny. I had this friend that lived, in Denmark, so international friend, and we were having a conversation about mom guilt, and she was like, I might be speaking out of turn. This was just her one perspective, but she was like, yeah, that's not really a thing here. And I was like, come again? And she's like, yeah, I mean, like mom guilt. She's like, I mean, we feel guilty. Like, of course it's a human emotion, but as like a societal norm, that's not really a thing here. Like we're human beings. We get to take care of ourselves the same way we're taking care of the other human beings. That was such an interesting perspective for me because it is rampant.
Are you saying that I have dad guilt right now? Like I feel guilty because I'm literally
you
like
have spouse guilt. It sounds
spouse
like
guilt.
Right. And the thing is that guilt is a valid, normal human emotion. Like guilt's a good thing. We want a moral censor of like when we're doing something right or when we're doing something wrong. The tricky thing about guilt is that guilt tells us we're doing something wrong. And there are times that it's triggered when we aren't actually doing anything wrong. So if you have a therapist, or a skilled coach who's able to help you, challenge that, reframe that, deal with that maybe distorted belief that you're doing something wrong, then that's a huge opportunity. But even like quick wins for clients, a lot of times I tell them, let's say you feel guilty because you want to go get a workout in and you're leaving, your husband alone with the 2 kids, or you're leaving him at daycare a little longer to go make that happen. What I try to encourage clients to do is say, what are the benefits of you making this choice more than the detriments, right? The benefits are that maybe when you do go pick up your kids, you're happier, you're more patient, you're less stressed. Maybe then you're really excited to see them. And since you're less irritable or distracted, you want to have more quality, uninterrupted time with them. You feel better or stronger to pick them up or play that physical game with them. Can we focus on the benefits of it more than whatever you perceive as the detriment? Because then we start to see, oh, not only am I not doing anything wrong, I'm actually doing something really right for me and for my family.
Can you say I'm gonna make sure my wife listens to it, minute
just say that
16,
one more time.
minute 16, in its entirety, because I have a level of guilt where it's like I'm not doing anything wrong in this moment. I could be out like drinking with the boys or doing drugs or doing deleterious, BS essentially. But it's like I'm feeling guilty as a result of like trying to put my family first, and it's a really weird predicament that I find myself in. Again, trying to because logically it makes sense. Logically, go do extra work and you will be rewarded, and usually handsomely, right? That's how you. I feel like that's a growth mindset in a nutshell, right? But then there is this little voice in the back of the head, oh, but what about her? What about her? What about her? What about the kids? And how are they interpreting this? And it's been an interesting thing because she'll be like, oh, you haven't gotten the kids by 4:30. This is a common marriage argument, right? And I was like, 4:30, they didn't get there till 9:30. It's like, most people work from 9 to 5, right? What do you do then? I know our lives are maybe a little more, quote, a little easier than most people, but if you have a hard cap on work time and then you can then get into playtime with the kids, wouldn't you rather me be around? So it's this really weird situation mentally dealing with that, this guilt and pursuit of new things. And again, I'm a male, I'm a dad experiencing something probably similar to how moms are. Oh, I feel guilty because I'm leaving the kid in daycare for too long. But I mean, I was like, the whole reason we put them in there for 5 days a week was to give ourselves more time for the things that help us then be present with them. Right. And I try to argue that with her, and she's like, well, you should just get them earlier so then they're with you. I was like, but that's not quality time.
Right. And studies that I've seen do show, quality matters over quantity of time. Even 10 minutes uninterrupted with a child, undistracted, uninterrupted, phone down, is more beneficial than a distracted, interrupted, irritable hour. But I think even the reframe of, instead of, I feel so guilty because I'm worried that she's with them and I just love them so much and shouldn't I be putting them first? There's also the reframe of, how lucky are they to have a dad who's concerned about this, who wants to put them first, who is focusing on that, and how lucky are you to have a family that you're so devoted to and dedicated to? I think one thing that tends to work really well that I've seen with my clients and within my own marriage is that when you both start believing that self-care is essential, like in our house, self-care is essential for myself, for my husband, and for our children to see. It is like, mommy needs to go work out right now. Mommy needs to go take a minute right now. Do you need to go take a minute? Do you need to move your body? This is a modeled experience. And so that becomes less guilt provoking because it is a value of our family and because we become more and more desensitized to it. And also, like, I know when my husband's tapping out, he knows when I'm tapping out. We can say, like, you need to go take a minute because it's so normalized within our family. And I think that that's also a way to manage guilt, is to approach the guilt with compassion and curiosity. I wonder why I'm feeling guilty. Could it be that it's because I love my family so much and I really want to make sure I'm showing up for them, versus approaching the guilt with criticism? Well, now I'm not there and my wife has to take care of them again, right? And that curiosity for a partner too. Hey, I know that I've been gone. How can I show up for you? What do you need right now? And how can I be present to make sure that happens? And that's the one, I think, hindrance to me with one-on-one coaching, is that usually for most of my clients, there's a partner, there's a child, there's a roommate, there's a someone that is impacting their ability to feel good and see results. And like, teamwork makes the dream work. So anytime that we can get like a partner involved and it can be a participatory process, it's going to be more successful.
So dang good. And not to air out my laundry and not to take over this part, right?
I'm gonna air mine out, Marcos.
Okay, cool. But like, I mean, you know what? Like, I think part of the guilt, and you can maybe weigh in on this because you delve into the mind probably more than even myself, is the fact that it's like, I feel guilty about the asking of her, like things that like potentially I've made life too comfortable. You know what I mean? Because she is the mother of my children. You know, we've been married for 5 years now. We have our son that's turning 5. Like, you know, it's a new phase that we're both a little uncomfortable with, because I mean, not to say that life was easier during COVID, but like life was a little easier in the sense that like everything was shut down. You're always around one another. And it was like, I'm going to call it junk quality time. It was like you were there, but you weren't really present. There wasn't much going on. But the fact that there's like these new nuances of life that are coming in, and I have to deal with like weird people, you know what I mean? I'm not saying everybody's weird, but like there's just like different interactions with people. I was like, whoa, like yesterday I had like a very type A person. I like totally misread him in dealing with it. And the doctor was like, oh, you've never dealt with a very strong D in the DISC method? I was like, no, like everybody to me is just like happy-go-lucky, I feel like. And so as I'm processing these things and getting these new life experiences, you know, I'm trying to open up and, like you just said, be more compassionate toward my partner, because I know it's stressful because she has bath time with 2 kids. Like, and as all parents know, that's like like anything to get out of bath time. Like, I'll do the freaking dishes. I will clean the grill in the middle of the night in winter, in the 70-degree winter or 70-mile-per-hour winter storm that's going on, you know? And yeah, so I feel like it's that, even though, and then like, again, I think most of it comes down to communication. And sometimes it's like, I don't want it to feel like a, you know, a blow at her, you know, but I guess that's probably where the next question will come in. But Seamus, I'll let you put some stuff there too.
I'm not so sure if this falls down the same line of guilt, because I really love this. But even though I have my pale complexion, I grew up in the Philippines. My family's Filipino, and my girlfriend's family, she's Filipino. How do you deal with like kind of like the immigrant mindset of things? Because I feel guilty in a sense that like my mom came here, she put food on the table, paid the bills, 4 boys, was single, and worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs at once just to make that happen. And I see the same thing with my girlfriend, like her family, all like nurses, all in the medical field. This is how Filipinos roll. And I see the same thing in her, where it's like she hates the concept of like lazy. She feels guilty when she doesn't do certain things, and it's like the self-care stuff, like, hey, let's go get a massage, or hey, let's just take a nap, or hey, like, let's just watch a TV show. Because if she isn't filling up the time with work or her other schoolwork or anything like that, and like same thing for me, if I'm like, if these hours aren't booked, I'm like, I feel like I'm just not living up to the I don't know, expectations, or to what my family put forth for us. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, have you seen that before? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I see it both therapeutically and in coaching, and it's kind of like a fine line of where does it become more effective to deal with in therapy versus coaching. But
yeah,
first of all, I think anytime you work with a client, you are doing them a disservice if you're not taking into consideration cultural considerations, right? So understanding background and history, like in my intakes with my clients, we are addressing their upbringing, their parenting, like, or what their parents' parenting style was like, because I think that that is imperative to understand your client and who they are and what they've gone through in order to get to where they are, but also from a cognitive perspective, the stories that they might have. And I think that there comes a time when there's an opportunity with a client to not only become more aware of those stories and that those narratives they hold on to, but also, and does that still work for you? And sometimes it's, yes, like, this is really important to me. This is a value I hold. It is crucial for me that, like, I be productive, and self-care is not a priority for me. Usually those people are not totally ready, right, for the coaching process, the therapeutic process. And I have like endless empathy, and also have done this long enough to know people have to be ready to make change. We can't make the change for them, right? But that's the rarity. More often than not, when somebody comes to me and they're like, this is how I grew up, this is the stories I believe, and I say, and is that working for you now? And they're like, well, no, that's why I'm here. Like, I'm completely burnt out, or I'm struggling with my health, or I'm not comfortable in my own skin, or especially for parents, like, this is not, I don't want to raise my children to believe what I was raised to believe. Then we have an opportunity to break generational cycles. And that's not small work, right? So that's not like, let me give you this nutrition plan and then you'll no longer struggle with it anymore. Like, it's really a fine line between like coaching and counseling. But there's opportunity there to address the underlying narrative and rewrite it.
No, I love that. Sorry, Marcus. I just wanted to say, because I feel that sometimes when we have these stories or beliefs in our head and like we see it, I'm like, I can see that it doesn't serve me or my girlfriend because of the fact that we're being irrational or we're reacting in different ways, or like, you know, for example, like, it's kind of like that concept of like anger is so irrational. It's like, let's say you blow out your tire, you know, on the freeway. Well, it's not like you're going to go park the car and then shoot all 4 tires. Like, no, like sometimes I feel like there are those moments where it's like passion, anger, criticism, feedback, like all this stuff gets so intense because of like the stories we were telling ourselves, and like just because of the fact that we don't prioritize maybe 15 minutes of like, hey, get off your phone and get off the computer, like, you know. And it's like, really, like, dang. It's just wild. But Marcus, go ahead.
No, the generational guilt, I guess, is like, I don't even know if that's a thing, but we're gonna coin it here.
Please.
It's funny because like it made me immediately think of like you just said with nutrition. Here's your nutrition plan. Try telling someone that's like a Filipino or a Hispanic culture person that they're not going to eat rice for the rest of their life because they're a type 2 diabetic or something. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like I feel like if you're willing enough to like initiate a certain decision because it's an informed one relative to your health, that's a great way to like look at it. But to be so dogmatic, like it's gone for good, and it's like, says who? I mean, I've seen, you know, like we can look at some of the studies that say, hey, maybe just eat less of it, right? Like learn how to like position it so that it's part of the plate and not the only thing on it.
Correct. Well, and I think that very few things in life are black and white. So even when we look at emotional eating, there's so much negativity around emotional eating, which I understand. It's often utilized as a coping mechanism.
That was me yesterday, literally in the hotel room.
Sometimes emotional eating is good. Like, I know when I'm sick, I want like my mom's chicken soup, right? Like, that for me is an emotional experience. Like, I like to have, I mean, I don't even like cake, but I like to have cake at my kids' birthday parties because that's part of that celebration with them.
Yeah.
There's certain times that like I feel immense joy. I mean, I love food in general. So like I like restaurants, I feel immense joy eating. You know, for me to have a really strict protocol that didn't allow space for emotion or nostalgia or ritual or foods that are part of the quality of life would be a no-go for me. So I think that we also have to be mindful that like some clients emotionally eat because they're stressed and because in the moment it works until it doesn't, and that might not serve them. So can we introduce different coping skills and different tools? And then there's also times that like rice is a part of their culture, or chicken soup is what they want to eat when they're sick, or whatever. And we don't want to take away that emotional process for them.
Yeah. I was going to ask to follow up on that. I was talking about this with somebody, and to talk about more so on the vices, like alcohol, cheat days, holidays or birthdays, for example, right? I was asking that question, and maybe you can delve into this, is like, what are we trying to fill with those foods? Or what are the things that are not just our mouths, you know, obviously, and our stomachs, but yeah, emotionally, what do you feel, Jess, that people are trying to do with, like, I don't know, like what you've seen, like, oh, this is why I do, you know, you deal with moms, and I've worked with a lot of moms, and they're like, at the end of the day, I just got to have a thing of wine. And I've seen this time and time again, and I'm not saying that's every mom. I'm just saying that's what I've seen. What do you think people are trying to fill with, like, those vices of theirs? And not to say they're good, bad. I'm just saying they're looking for something. What do you feel like that's been?
I think that it's less the tool and more why the tool is being used. So it goes back to that understanding why. I have some clients who, you know, maybe like if I say, what are the non-negotiables for you? And they say like a cheat meal or alcohol, getting rid of alcohol is non-negotiable. And when we dig deeper, we're like, you know, and I explore like, what is it for you about this glass of wine every night? And you're like, every single night we put our kids to bed together and we go and we sit out on the back porch and we share a glass of wine and we catch up for the day. And I feel the most connected to my partner in that 30 minutes of the day. I'm not willing to give that up, right? That feels very different than the kids are driving me crazy and I'm going to lose my mind if I don't have a glass of wine, right?
Yeah.
So same tool, totally different reasons why we're using it. Now, like couple that likes to go sit on the back porch, can we sub in a non-alcoholic drink sometimes? Maybe there's opportunity there. And also, if that's their one thing, and especially if their goal is longevity, I mean, listen, we could get on like a whole different conversation about alcohol and longevity, but just in general, talk about quality of life. If that's part of their quality of life, I'm not going to take that glass of wine away from them. We're going to take it into consideration. But for the client who's like, if I don't drink, I don't cope, that's a really different conversation. Same with the client who has like a bowl of ice cream every night, or, you know, and I think that again, when we take that biopsychosocial approach, we open ourselves up to so many different answers of that why. Like, why are we eating a gallon of ice cream? Is it an emotional need, like social need? Are you feeling alone and isolated and this feels a gap where you need to connect? Is it psychological? Or are you kind of saying, oh, well, I already screwed up the day, like might as well eat all of it? Or we're having—
That's more like me. That's more like me. I took one Oreo. It's like, well, I could just take the whole row, you know. Right. I want it to be clean.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, do it 100% if you're going to do it.
Yeah, right.
But most people can handle like a bowl of ice cream in their plan and they're going to be fine, but they don't need the whole gallon, right? So is there stress that we can't be managed, and to taste something good helps us take our mind off of what doesn't feel very good? Is it biological? Did you eat 400 calories today and now you're starving? And that's what's prompting like sugar cravings or you needing to overeat. So there's a whole like spectrum of different reasons why or what those vices fill. I think it's our opportunity as coaches to like be investigators a little bit to figure that out. And then when it gets to where it's like, hey, this is a lot more in the like emotional, psychological realm in a way that I am not skilled enough to help you, that's where it's a scope of practice issue. And we help get another professional in their support army with like mental health therapy.
Yeah. This is a good segue into this question. Bam. How does having a routine and fitness, fitness and eating help mental health? I know, right? We got to take advantage of all the
capabilities. You got to take advantage
here.
Of the StreamYard options here, man. I really appreciate that. But yeah,
but I mean, you just said like a coping mechanism could be like, did you have a bad day?
Right.
Were you poorly planned? Right? Like, did you fail to plan that day out? And I mean, this was a conversation with the person I spoke with today, and it was like, he's like, I don't really know. Wouldn't the sum of all your daily actions really matter more if you got to win the day, right? To win the week? And I was like, well, I mean, like, there's just days that you just don't win, you know, but the week can still be a fantastic week as a whole. And it was like, he brought up a really good counter argument to like the way I was trying to like approach the conversation, like learn to win the week versus win the day. And more often than not, you'll do that. And, but again, like there was something that then was like, I was like, but sometimes there's like weekends, and weekends are different than your work days, right? Like most people don't operate like me, where like I do like kind of the same exact routine, literally Monday through Sunday, like it's very unique. And that's just what my life is these days because of the kids and the structure and the routine. But like, does having that routine, how does that help with mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks really different. I have 2 kids too, around the same age as your kids, and my weekdays and my weekends look totally different from one another. And a large part of that is because of the stage of life we're in, right? Like my weeks are really really easy to manage because the kids are in school and my husband and I have our jobs and we have our systems. And then the weekends are like sometimes a train.
Or organized chaos. It's organized chaos.
Right, exactly. And like we're just doing the best that we can, but
Yeah.
I still have routines within my weekday and routines within my weekend, even if they're not the same, to be able to help me still feel good and successful. So here's the thing about routines with mental health. Most of the things that we're creating routines on, right? Food, movement, sleep, hydration. Like let's just go with that physical self-care category.
Yeah.
Almost every single one of those have been proven to be beneficial for mental health, right? Sleep is like the pillar of our memory, our concentration, our mood, all of it. So sleep is massively important. Individuals who are dehydrated are more likely to be anxious, or more likely to be irritable. Exercise has been proven to be the most effective antidepressant available. Undereating has been proven to be linked with obsessive thoughts around food, with anxiety, with depression. Right? Eating micronutrient rich foods, specifically foods rich in vitamin D, vitamin B, omega-3, all linked with depression, with anxiety, with improving overall well-being. So the habits themselves are awesome. But to kind of like reiterate what your client said, doing all the things one day is not what sets us up for long-term health and longevity and success. Doing as many of the things as we can consistently over time. So that's where the routines kick in, is the routines make us more likely to do the things routinely, consistently over time to get the ongoing benefits of it. But on top of that, to take it one step further, some of the major triggers for stress and triggers for lack of success that I see with some of my clients, for example, are things like decision fatigue, are things like the mental load of motherhood, not having proper balance in their life. So when we have routines in place, we're also taking away the need to think about it, decide on it, figure it out. It's all already there for you. So not only are we preventing more things from pouring into the stress bucket, we're actively like poking holes in the stress bucket to empty it out a bit more too.
I freaking love that. Having routines is putting holes in the stress bucket. I'm gonna have to steal that. I'll have to steal that. I did want to ask there though, I think you brought up a big point, is when you're constantly thinking about things, and I guess maybe this is like the line of thinking of like being neurotic, I guess. I feel like that brings a lot more stress because you're like always questioning every decision, right? How do you deal with people like that are constantly questioning everything, just so in the weeds with their decisions? Because Marcos and I have had this conversation. I think I get like that. I know I get like that. That's why I have a coach, because I don't want to think about these things. I want someone else to just go, Seamus, shut up and just go. Like, how do you, I don't know, maybe deal with someone that's neurotic, maybe leaning orthorexic, meaning like, oh, it has to be so perfect. How do you deal with that? Especially with moms. I know moms want to feel like they're perfect, like they're getting the job done. How do you deal with that mindset shift?
So I feel like it's a loaded question because there's so many different elements to it, right? There's the perfection component, there's the questioner component, there's the routine component. First of all, I will say this is where the benefit of a coach comes in, right? Is for that one-on-one approach. And because you don't have to question as much when you have somebody that you trust and is an expert to be able to provide you with the evidence of why you're doing it and keep you structured. I also think that having somebody who meets you where you're at and understand what life looks like for you. So, right, like if Marcos and I had the same coach, Marcos's coach would be doing something very differently with him on Saturday and Sunday than what they're doing with me. So that's where that one-on-one approach becomes really helpful. I still have routines on the weekends. Like I still need to have food available. I still need to have a plan. I still need like time to work out, but it just looks different. So that routine has been what has been structured for me so that I'm not overthinking it. Cause like I'm also an addict, that I'm not over stressing about it or wondering, what's going to happen next. I know what to fall back on. There's this I mean, I guess I don't know how much it applies, but it made me think of it when you were speaking. There's this really interesting concept. And Marcos, I know I've had you do it before, like in a group setting, this interesting principle developed by Gretchen Rubin called the Four Tendencies. And basically, it's the belief that we all fall into one of four categories in terms of how we take action and meet expectations. So I send it to every client that I coach because I think it helps me better coach them by understanding what their tendency is. So basically, like, to try and make
is this, Jess, to stop you, is this the one that's like you have like this type of category where it's like you're either on this line or up this way? Because I feel like
basically more, I mean,
is it regional based? Because like
quadrants. Yeah, it's more like you fall into one of these four quadrants, and there can always be some overlap. But basically, you're either the person most likely to meet internal and external expectations. That's called the upholder. The person most likely to meet external expectations before internal, the obliger. The person more likely to meet internal expectations before external, the questioner. Or the person who struggles to meet expectations and take action at all, the rebel. And by understanding where you lie, the goal is that you or your coach or your parent or your partner or whoever is going to be more likely to understand how you take action, meet expectations. Majority of the population, like myself, is the obliger. So it's not that I'm not self-motivated, but I am more likely to take action, be more efficient, and get things done if somebody else is placing that expectation on me. So our language, for example, is accountability. We do really well with coaches, deadlines, trackers, things like that. But for somebody, which you might be, Seamus, who's a questioner, basically the principle is if it does not make sense to you, if you don't understand why you're doing it, if there is not an internal drive, you are less likely to do it. So I think like the example she gave in the book, like the person who gets pulled over for going 35 and a 25. And it's like, but why? Like, it doesn't even make sense to me why, like, it has to be that speed limit. They're going to struggle with that a lot more than somebody who's like, okay, you said I was speeding. Like, that's fine. I'll slow down.
Yeah, I'm very much like that. I'm 100% agree because I'm a technician. Like, if I learn like a new move in jiu-jitsu, I will go deep into like finding out why it works. I'm gonna attack it from every angle so it works whenever it needs to work and it doesn't work when it doesn't. And for example, like if I learn a concept, I can't act upon that concept until I've read every single book on it, listened to every podcast. Like, for example, like let's just say with clients talking about their nutrition, I had to get multiple things about nutrition before I can even say, this is how we do nutrition. I have to be very much like, I have to know everything. And I don't know where that comes from, to be honest. Like, I don't know. I might have to go talk about that a little bit more, but it's like, I have to know everything and everything about something for it to be done. I don't know why.
Well, and sometimes questioners can sometimes be very research-based. They have to know, it has to make sense to them. There has to be a buy-in on their behalf. So when I work with clients who are questioners, their primary language is really like customization, right? So if I say to them, I mean, this is a very like low-hanging fruit, but if I say to them, we're going to touch base weekly, and they're like, but why? Like, I really only need someone every other week. And if I just said, well, that's the plan, like you get it or you don't, they're probably not going to sign up with me. If I say to them, either here are the reasons why we touch base weekly, here's why it's a benefit for you, here's why you're going to be more successful, and they're like, okay, that makes sense, then that would work for them. Or if I say, you know what, you're right, you're in a good spot, why don't we set up your plan to touch base every other week? Then they're also more likely. So that customization component in a way that makes sense for them. So that was like a very big derail. But when you were mentioning the questioner approach and like how I would deal with somebody who can get in the weeds with it, I think that there's a balance between understanding why and the mindset goals and what taking inventory of what their life looks like so that we can make plans that make sense to them, as well as that coaching component of how can I be a better coach to meet their needs.
I love it. I think I'm good on mine. Marcos, do you have any other questions? I just want to make sure we have appropriate time for Jess, but this is such a great combo. Marcos, anything else for her?
So which one was the one that was internal and external motivation?
Internal and external is the upholder.
Yeah. Upholder.
Their primary language, I believe, is scheduling. So like not only
does it want to be efficient.
Let me put this in my Google calendar.
No, I'm kidding. No, I definitely turned more into that because I used to be more of a questioner like Seamus, but I don't know if it's just been work change or whatever, but I'm like, oh yeah, I used to really question, and I had like these deep philosophical thoughts that related to like math theory and shit. And that was an old me, and now it's like I moved into like, I guess, fatherhood. And it's like now I'm like, okay, like now I need to be like, I have internal and external things I need to get done. And it's funny because it's like I think last time we did that exercise was like that's how I was. That was years ago. And then now I'm thinking about it, and it's like, no, I have like internal and external demands on myself. And the only way for me to really do that, like you just said, is scheduling. And I'm like not saying I'm like a slave to my calendar, but I know that like I rest easy knowing that if everybody's on there, that at least if I call them at that time and they can't talk to me, or then at least to a message, at least they're thought of from a client base. You know what I mean? At least they know that like I'm holding up my end of the bargain, and they may not be ready to show up, and we can move it around. I'm okay with that. But I just wanted to be on the calendar, not for them, but for me, to uphold that expectation of myself for them.
Right.
And again, I think maybe that's a good characteristic of a coach, but like, I mean, like I have checklists everywhere to just like in redundancies, because I mean, like I don't want to take people's money and not be able to provide the service. So
yeah,
it's funny.
I think it's for coaches and clients. I mean, I'm not an expert on Gretchen Rubin's principles. I don't know her beliefs on if you can change or if you stay put. But I do think with everything, there's always opportunity for growth, and life changes and you change. And I've had clients, myself included, who if they weren't going to that CrossFit class at 6 a.m., they weren't really working out. If they didn't have a program written for them, they weren't really working out, who now go to a season in life where they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to the gym for me. I don't need anybody else placing that expectation. And part of that comes from habit creation, and part of that comes from a buy-in, and part of that comes from understanding and taking inventory of what works in your life in this season and how to make it happen. So it's always utilizing tools for support, but knowing that you're always capable of growth and change.
Yeah.
I think to say that though, and I think I mentioned this before with Seamus, and you weren't obviously here, Jess, but I used to wonder, why can't people execute on X's and O's of like the macros, in the sense that literally like this is the plan, stick to it. Like like what all you're doing is like not behaving in a way to help you materialize your goal. And it was my parents, and this is me as a 21-year-old, right? And then like now my expectations have changed. It's like I asked that question as part of like, we'll call it the intake, or that whole process of getting to know and build the rapport. And I'm like, what are the external influencers? It's just like getting somebody on a sales call, right? Where you're like, is there anybody else that needs to be on this call that might dictate your decision, right? Like, because if so, they need to be here as well, right? And that's usually where, like, for most people in sales, they know that like their pitch is going to die, because let me consult my wife. It's like, like that should have been like the first question you asked. But I feel like nowadays it's good to be open to moving into different categories or putting yourself in those shoes. And I'm sure that I've never read any Gretchen Rubin stuff or anything, but like, I remember that distinctly. I now feel like I identify here, and I feel like it's just like an Enneagram thing. It's like, I feel like I'm constantly changing between 1 and 9 and 9 and 1 to 2 to 8. It doesn't really, it's like, what's my flavor of the week? You know what I mean? Because it's like, it's an ambiguity with it. And, I also think that like, maybe that's part of a growth mindset, is that you start moving things around. Oh, maybe I'm more effective here or there. Right.
Right. And just being able to encourage clients to do that too. The reality is, most of my clients don't understand how to don't have the capacity, or are not in a position to hit the X's and O's, right? Because they're humans and they're not robots, and life is complicated and multifaceted, and even best intentions don't work out. So when I get a client who like crushes it, it's like a breeze, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so easy.
I'm a genius.
Yeah. But I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of my success right now. But most clients are not like that. And I think that sometimes for those of us who move into coaching, we are like that. Like if I am given a plan, if I'm given a macro plan, I'm going to hit it perfectly, like to the gram, right? Yeah. So when you are introduced to people who aren't maybe in that position or aren't able to do that, it can be confusing and frustrating, but it's sometimes because we're making it about us and not them. So being able to have the opportunity to make it about them and understand like, what are the barriers here? And maybe it doesn't mean that you don't want to see success. Maybe it's something about what we're doing that doesn't work for you. And there are going to be clients who are just not a good fit for coaching, and that happens too. But usually most people, the majority of the population, are not high-level athletes. They've never done an intense nutrition plan that would actually work for them and that could actually stick. And they have really busy, overwhelming lives with a lot of mindset blocks and a lot of stories that they tell themselves. And so to me, it's kind of like a privilege to be a coach, getting to sit in on those things that they don't tell anybody else. You know, I've had clients where they've told me they were pregnant before they told their husband. Like, that's a really cool thing, to be that privileged of information, all because I was willing to sit beside them and figure out where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. I honestly love this whole thing. I don't want to go any further because I feel like that's perfect, like where we're at. I really appreciate your time. Just as I feel like we can keep going, but I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe we might have to do a part 2, because there's so many more questions and so many more. Maybe next time, maybe less on the coaching counseling side, but maybe on the deeper stuff, because I know we were touching on some of that, but I know we weren't getting into it too much, just to make it delve into the area that we wanted to get into. But maybe next time we could just do that, and we'll set aside time for that. But Marcos, anything else? Oh,
I did have one last question. Yeah. And I'm like, now I'm like, mental block. What the heck? It was a good question. It was really, say that last thing you just said related to the parent, Jess. Sorry, like it's like right on the tip of my tongue.
Mentioned about some moms sharing pregnancy news before telling their husbands, and it's a privilege. It's there.
Done, man.
It's there. It's gonna come back to you as soon as we get off.
It's how it always works.
Really is.
Yeah. Damn, dude. Now this is why I'm like trying to like take notes on this sometimes, but all right. Well, I guess it was a good way to end it too. I swear. Like, now you're like, oh, what it was. I was like, stay tuned for part 2, y'all. No, but yeah. I honestly, I think Seamus is right. I think like we definitely, as we're trying to build this and just have fun, like deeper conversations, and again, like keep people's interest for that period of time. This has been super great, and I really appreciate you being able to share your insight with everything that you have and your passion there. And you're very modest about like all the stuff you've done. Like you've written courses on this. I mean, technically a book, right? So like you're truly like a mental health expert, and it's very awesome just to like be able to be in your presence. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was fun. I'd love to do a part 2.
Yes, we'll do a part 2, and we'll get that question down from Marcos next time, and we'll open with it, and then we'll go into maybe we'll go into deeper mental health stuff that isn't so much about fitness, nutrition, longevity. Maybe just really going into more of an esoteric conversation. We'll see how that flows. So thank you so much, Jess.
Of course.
Right.
Thank you guys.
And then lastly, where can people find you on the socials?
So I've got, the best place to find me is probably Instagram. I post a ton of free content there. My handle is at mindbody.mamatherapist, and that mama is MAMA. Also, I have a blog and some freebies and stuff up on my website, which is mamamethodwellness.com, also MAMA. And then that'll link you to my email too.
Awesome. Sweet. Awesome. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks guys for listening. Thank you for checking out the macro perspective. We'll definitely get back on a part 2. Please like, subscribe, check us out now that we are officially on Spotify, which is an amazing thing. I feel like, and again, like we're going through it, right, Seamus? We're figuring this thing out. We have no idea what we're doing. We're just like having good conversations. So
the only way through is in, and we're just gonna keep going in as far as we can.
That's good. That's a good one. All right, guys. Later.